Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two World Podcast. And today we are happy and excited to start on our third season. And of course, I am one of your co-hosts, and I'm Barney. And with me here is my other co-host, and he is
Jacob.
And over the past two full years, and a bit, Jacob and I have had the chance to sit down together and with other guests and with repeat guests and kind of unofficial co-hosts and talk about a number of issues on a number of topics and just kind of see how we were led by the flow of the conversation and the spirit to discuss various topics in interesting ways, I think. And I guess over more than 70 episodes now, we are thankful that you have welcomed us into your viewing space or listening space. And we're so glad that you have stuck with us and hope that you've been learning a lot along the way and thinking about a lot of things along the way too. And today we want to do one of the things I always look forward to, kind of a reflection episode, kind of looking back at least on our second season together as we're getting ready to start season 3 and maybe even a little bit further back. So we've prepared some things to talk about, and we also thought that we'd just kind of see how things go, and we might have a little bit of a fun little activity together here today too, later on in the show. But I guess maybe a good way to start would be thinking of some of our favorite shows that we've had over the last year. And I guess our last season, our second season, started off with a show that we did with Lee Matzos. And I don't know what it was about that show, but I really, really liked that show. And it was definitely one of my top choices of shows that was fun to listen to and fun to hear from our guest in that episode. And I wonder, maybe as I talk about this, I wonder if it was one of our very more personal episodes. I felt that Lee was, it was intimate in a way that Lee and Jacob were in the same room together when we recorded. And then it was also very intimate in a way that Lee really opened up, I think, to everyone, to us and to you and me and everyone listening. He really had a true journey that he had been on and is still going on, and sharing that with us, I thought, was just a real meaningful episode, and I really appreciated that one. I thought that it was I was glad that we got it. The timing was right for his concert that was coming up. I'm glad we got that in, but I thought it was just a great way to start off the season. How about for yourself, Jacob? Did you want to comment on that episode too, and or share with us some of the episodes that stuck out from the past season?
Yes, I would love to comment on that episode. It's interesting you mentioned that one because it was just almost exactly a year ago that we recorded that episode with Lee, almost to the day that we recorded that with him. And that was leading up to a concert he was putting on at Worcester Mennonite Church, which itself, even the preparation and the lead up to that concert had a lot of meaning and purpose and richness in its own right. And so to have Lee on and to share his story of recovering from multiple concussions and coming through a period of grief and loss, mourning the passing of his mother and grandmother, and then in the midst of all of that, to have the songs that came to him almost as if he felt like inspired, like gifts from God that came to him, just flowed. The music just flowed, and he was writing it down. And then for him to be able to talk about that music and then perform it just a little bit after that podcast that we recorded, it felt very powerful. And since I had the chance to walk alongside Lee during that period of when before our podcast for multiple months as he was getting ready for the concert, and then since then, I actually wrote Lee an email yesterday about that podcast because I was thinking about getting ready for today. I was thinking about...
He's written you back.
Yes. Just where the past year has taken him and
Mm.
how his journey continued beyond where we talked with him. And so, believe it or not, it's like full cycle. There is another concert coming up
Ah,
a week from today in the
wow.
Rialto Theater, which is in Akron, I believe. And it is a concert that's celebrating the release of the first part of his album that he recorded at Plaid Dog Studios through a crowdfunding campaign. And
Wow.
so, yeah, in the intervening year, he was able to get backers and go and record at the studio. And he's already put out some music through streaming platforms. But this upcoming Friday is going to actually celebrate the launch of that first part of his album, which is a collection of songs. And
Wow.
then it will be on streaming
Wow.
platforms. There's even a physical CD that he's selling, and that his backers would get if they selected that when they backed him. And so, anyway, it's so interesting that here we are a year later and his journey's
Mhm.
continued. And so I shot him an email just saying, like, and I took a few quotes from our interview from last year, and I said, I wonder how much of this can you still relate to now, a year later? How much of it remains the same? How much of it is changed or gone deeper? And he wrote me back, and he said, it's good to be reminded of the
Mm.
meaning from last year's interview of where he was in his journey. And he says, I still need to hear those same messages that I was sharing back then today, because as you continue to grow as a person and face new challenges and situations, you still need to remember where you were, the ground you've covered, and the wisdom that you had in the past, and bring it with you into the present. So it was really nice to hear back from him. And yeah, I agree. That was by far one of the highlights of this past season
Mm.
for our podcast, for sure. So thanks for bringing that up.
Mhm.
An episode that I was thinking of that
Mhm.
was kind of an unexpected surprise, but ended up being a highlight and one of my favorite episodes was the one that we recorded about our grandparents.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was so interesting because we each had some photos to share. And I think you had one of your grandfather on his tractor, if I'm remembering correctly. And then I had
Uh,
one of my grandmother with her kindergarten class, and or maybe it was her daycare class, one of the two.
mhm.
And it was just so fascinating to share our stories together, and then to start to like get inspired as we did that. I loved hearing how you shared about how your grandfather would sing, and he knew all the
Mm.
words to these different hymns, and how that was an inspiration to you and your faith. And I never knew that, and I liked hearing that. And then I was able to share with you about how the 12 step program was so powerful for my grandfather on my mom's side, and meaningful. And so I felt like that episode was also very personal. And it is to this day the most viewed of all of our
Wow.
videos. So,
Wow.
which also surprised me. I remember I was going to pick up uh, curry at the curry pot, and some other Indian food. And I just was waiting for a few minutes before going in, because they schedule certain times when you pick up. And then I looked at
Mhm.
our podcast and I saw like all the views for that episode. I was like, what? It was much more than I was used to seeing. And I was like,
Yeah,
wow,
yeah,
like
yeah,
that
yeah.
was just, it must have maybe for certain people just struck a
Mm.
chord with their own experience, or as they thought of their
Mhm.
grandparents. But yeah, that was definitely a highlight for me.
Yeah, I like how that one came about too, that topic, because we weren't necessarily thinking of doing that one, and I think we mentioned how it was inspired by the kind of Japanese, probably Asian observance holiday that's also in September, of being respectful of the elders around you. And yeah, when you were talking, it makes me think of an episode in the other podcast I do with Sean, that we did in our first season about family trees.
Ah,
And Sean is very, very interested in genealogy, just out of not just out of personal interest, and putting together all the different stories that he has from his different branches of his family. And he also mentioned at the conclusion of that episode how um, a lot of us, for sure, maybe don't spend a lot of time with the elders in our family, the older generations, and probably don't even spend a whole lot of time, giving much thought to it. But that episode that you and I did together really brought home that notion of how very valuable it is to think about the time that we've spent, the ways we've been impacted, the lessons that we gleaned or kind of overheard in a way. They weren't intended necessarily for us, but we picked up on what was happening and brought home a lot of real good wisdom that has stuck with us. And I think for me, myself for sure, and probably you as well, like it inspires us to in how we are and what we do and say with raising our own kids and the relationships around us. And it's just so you're right. It wasn't anything special that episode, but it truly must have struck a chord with a lot of people that they wanted to tune in for that one. That's really fun to know.
Yes, I agree. Yes. It is also kind of interesting to think about the guests that we were able to have on our show. We already mentioned Lee, but I
Hmm.
was hoping that we could mention a few others and some of the
Hmm.
time that we were able to spend with them, if that's okay. So,
Oh yeah.
um, you mentioned your other podcast with Sean. It was
Mm-hmm.
actually really meaningful to have him on
Yeah.
to talk about the journey of grief. And he has recently lost his father, and I had lost my parents. You've lost you had lost your mom recently, and
Hmm.
so the three of us could compare our experiences, share our stories, comfort one another, learn from one another.
Hmm.
That was a very powerful episode,
Oh yeah.
and um, it's interesting because I listen to your other podcasts and follow you regularly there, and we have done some crossover episodes with Sean before, but that episode when he came on our show, I just really appreciated the depth that
Oh
we were able
yeah.
to get to in the conversation because I don't know, that was a very special. I've just am really impressed and blessed with the connection we had in that time and how deep we were able to go together with that. So that was meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I really appreciated that too. It was very, very helpful for me at the time where I was in my life as well, in my walk with grief. And I loved that it felt like it felt like Sean was a real genuine guest at that time. He is our friend and we know him well, and we know his personality. But that time it really seemed like he let all of that go away and he really engaged himself with the topic because he really had a lot of great insight to share. And I'm so glad that he was willing to unpack that and be real genuine with us. And felt like it was really a nice thing, I think, for him to go through as well. He asked afterward, he really liked to, he followed up and asked how the episode was received. He was really thought,
Yes.
how did we
It's
feel
our
about it? Yeah.
it's
And
our
it
second
was,
most viewed episode
wow.
after the one on
Yeah.
grandparents.
I
So
know. Yeah. I'll have to let him know.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think that also resonated with people. Again, it's another
Mm-hmm.
one that it just, I think a lot of people have that experience. And so it's a topic that is very accessible and really a universal topic that I think
Mm-hmm.
many,
Mm-hmm.
many people
Yeah.
can relate to. So I'm grateful. Yeah, I remember in part of Sean's sharing how he talked about doing things remotely and trying to
Mm.
offer support while being far away. And that was hard to hear, like for somebody who wants
Oh yeah.
to be there to support family but can't. And for part of it, COVID interfered and you just
Mm.
couldn't do certain things, you couldn't travel. But then just the distance of where he's living, where his mom's living, and trying to step in and fill that role, be a caregiver and help his mom. So it was inspiring to hear how there were breakthroughs for him and
Mm-hmm.
ways that he did get things done, and good things that did happen, and lessons and connections. The time that his mom accidentally, no, maybe it was his aunt. His aunt accidentally called him by his father's name.
Oh yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was
Mm-hmm.
so special, and the connection that he felt with his dad in that moment. when that happened and the connection he felt with her. And I think, were his children able to meet her? Or I felt like there was some connection. They met some family members that was, it was
Yeah.
very meaningful for Sean. So yeah, there
Oh, yeah,
was
they did.
very
Yeah, his aunt.
special
Yeah.
moments there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which this draws me to a point that we were kind of
Yeah.
talking about before the show began, and that is that like there's a certain power in storytelling, I
Mm,
think, and reflecting on people's lived experiences. It's more than just something that entertains us. I think it's something that reveals meaning and beauty in our lives and helps us grow. And so I feel like that's a very important thing in our podcast that we're trying to do, to make space for people to share their stories, to celebrate them, to be there in the moment when they name something or reveal something and say, that is beautiful, that is good. We can learn from that. Even to let at times the stories challenge us, so we can grow. And so I
mhm.
hope that's something that our audience can enter into as well as they hear these stories, that it can be something that inspires and brings beauty into their lives and growth, and that can be still an ongoing thing even as we move forward into future episodes and future seasons. That would be one of those threads that goes throughout the power of storytelling and the
Yeah.
sharing lived experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That makes me actually my thoughts, my kind of eyeline sight had gone to that question as well. Thinking about other guests, especially since we've had guests and personal stories, and I feel like we've had a lot of like a lot of unexpected, really moving of the spirit in people's lives that we've heard from Michael Ludwig's story to
Yes.
Brendan's story to um, um, a number of the guests that we've had, and then thinking of storytelling kind of in I want to say literal way, but at the same time I mean it more abstractly. I think about the kind of series that we had with when we were looking at the art installation of the door, and
Mm.
Jen Klingbaum, that was
Kinbom,
our
yes.
guest. Kim Bom, that was our guest, and she the story that she was telling with her art installation, but then the fact that it was an art installation, um, the the open interpretation that went with that story, which I thought was really neat, how we connected kind of episode one, episode two that went together, where we were talking with her and hearing the whole journey that she went through, and then as you and I kind of saw how it spoke to us, and I don't know, did you hear other people from church or from the conferences or just here and there who saw the art installation and heard any kind of interpretation that they took away from it?
Yes, for sure. I know that while we did the podcast at the same time, our church was going through a series called Doors, where we had the art installation that she created at the front of our sanctuary. And we would refer to it each week as we went through that series, looking at different important doors in the Bible and reflecting on what they meant in each of those stories and how they can inspire us today as we think of doors. Uh, and so people who were responding after church, and sometimes people would come up or share with me how, like, they loved the way that Jen in her art installation captured the idea that a door is full with the idea of potential. It can open, it can extend a space where people can come in for hospitality. Um, at times, the door closes and it can give us a sense of security, like we're inside and cozy. But then we have to watch out, because sometimes the door closing can be a sign of exclusion and holding other people out. And so at different times in the series, people would come up to me after the service and say, I'm really glad we're doing this series. I'm really glad that we have Jen's art up front. the door that she created. And I think that of all the series I've done in recent memory, that's one of the ones where we got the
Mm.
most positive affirmation and
Oh yeah.
feedback for doing the
Mm.
series and the visual that was up front. And it seemed to really resonate with people because doors are part of everyday life. We see them all the time. So we're familiar with the concept and the function of a door, but then kind of looking at it from a different point of view and exploring the idea of the door metaphorically and how it relates to our faith. And I think that really got people thinking. So yes, to answer your question, I did have lots of people responding, and it was a good thing. And
Mm.
so I was so glad we were able to tie in with that conversation from church in our podcast, because then that just broadened the audience that could think about it and enter into that. So for sure. Um, so as we think about um, the guests that we had,
Mhm.
and we want to think about how we learn from their perspectives and listen to them. um, I guess I'm kind of wondering, what were there certain things that our guests said that touched you the most, that spoke to certain needs that you have in your life, or maybe that challenged something that you thought, or your perspective? I'm just kind of wondering, as we think of those conversations, what were some of your takeaways? And while you're thinking about that, I
Mhm.
just want to give an example.
Yeah.
So when we had Molly Sponsler on,
Mm.
um, she was so open and and vulnerable and willing to share her journey, which was so appreciated. I really valued that time with her, and the journey that she's been on with her family, moving to Germany. And they essentially moved right as the pandemic was
Yeah.
unfolding, at the very early weeks, just as we were becoming aware of it. And so they arrived, and then promptly everything shut down around them, and they just entered this new community. And so a lot of her story was about kind of struggling and trying to find her way while being isolated. And so I think, as we were talking, that is an uncomfortable space to reflect on. That's an uncomfortable experience. But I was really inspired by the resilience that Molly had to kind of keep seeking after connection for herself, for her kids, kind of trying again, um, and just having a hope that
Mm.
they could move forward, that God would be with them, that they would get through, that there would be a provision. And that was really inspiring for me to hear. And so that would be an example from my
Mhm.
end of a time,
Mhm.
like, we heard a story that took us in through a place that was uncomfortable, like for our guest, but left us with a really inspiring message. And um, I just really valued that from Molly. So is there something that stands out to you?
Yeah. I mean, first, if I can just say a few words on that,
Sure.
I can. I think there was a really in her case, that was the uncomfort, the being out of her comfort zone, and the discomfort was really expansive through that episode. In the fact, as she's so gregarious and outgoing, and here she finds herself, she says, in Bavaria, where kind of some kind of cultural trend is to be more reserved amongst the people there. And
Yes.
I felt that, as I think about it, that could have gone either way. As she did say many times how she smiles and waves and is friendly as much as she can, and set people off balance a bit at times. Initially, I wonder if that helped her to scratch deeper into the surface, um, maybe more faster than what a typical person who would try to maybe adjust, who, not knowing the culture but trying their best to assimilate to the culture, might not
Yes.
have been able to make that much progress as she did. As although she was trying to assimilate, she was also exerting a little bit of who she was, and just who she is as a person kind of broke down the doors a little bit, kind of made people feel a little bit at ease, knowing that
Mm.
she's just a bright wonderful, charming person, and it's okay to be a little bit more open with her. And um, but yeah, I mean, the whole time, the whole beginning of her experience there, things were just very tough, and she was really in an uncomfortable place for a while, I think.
That's very
Um,
true. That's a really
mhm,
good point, Barney. I'm glad you mentioned that. And there were a few moments when she was talking about trying to trying to find connection with others. And
mhm,
she said, we're trying to be present where we are. That they were trying to um, not just go through the motions or bide their time while they were in Germany, but actually to be present and
mhm.
engaged and all in, you know.
Yeah.
And she
Oh,
also
yeah.
said she said, and I'm just going to quote her here because I went through and got a few quotes recently from some of her episodes, and this is one that I was thinking about. She said, like, we learned so much about contentment that first year.
Mhm.
We learned to really do without some things, she said, and that was that first year with the lockdown with COVID. And it's just so inspiring, like how engaged and present she and her family were. And in the time when there wasn't really much to do, they sought to find contentment in that, even. And that was just very mature and inspiring. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And
Mhm.
were there other thoughts that you had from other episodes or guests related to that question of things that touched you or spoke to deeper needs that you feel or challenge your perspective?
Yeah. I um I thought that Michael Ludwig, he really opened up kind of my idea and thought of what
Mm,
missionaries work is these days, and the perspective
yes.
that they take. And it was very interesting to hear how they are approaching going about that, and kind of the outline, the path that they have to their goal is has really shifted in what maybe people, missionaries in the same area, may have thought the path to the goal was, 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it was, I mean, I haven't been keeping up too much, but I didn't realize that is probably a trend that's happening in other
Mm,
mission fields too. And that was so neat to hear his story, how he got involved. Sadly that they had to leave, but then hopefully that they're hoping to get back again, or still remain involved. And it's another way that kind of COVID had upset things, but
mhm.
then that we can see God working in people's lives despite that, and kind of taking things on a different path and different way, and still bringing about a lot of good through that. I saw that in his story, and then I saw a lot of similarities with my story and my journey with the episode that we had Brendan on as a guest. And I think I was looking through our list of episodes and the runtime, and I saw that one was a little bit longer runtime because I think Brendan and I had a lot of back and forth because we saw a lot of similarities in our journeys that had taken us to different parts of Asia. And that was interesting to see a little bit of my journey in a way from someone else's perspective, based on similarities that we shared. And I thought that was really interesting to be able to work through that with you and Brendan together at that time.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. I both of those uh, were definitely special episodes for me too, and had unique points of focus and challenge. Like going back to Michael Ludwig's just for a minute. Yes, like as you said, he really talked a lot about the having a posture of humility, and foreign missions has a very complicated and in many ways lamentable legacy in Africa and in other places around the world where missionaries came in and essentially brought Western culture and tried to impose Western ideas and ways of doing things in the church, and didn't permit space for there to be local expressions of Christian faith and life. And so he talked a lot about this idea of of having a posture of humility. And I really like that, having a learning posture. And he had this quote. He said, "Oh, I took I took some of these positions of power for granted." And I thought that's interesting. Like when he came in, he like didn't realize all the ways in which um, he came with certain resources and certain things available to him that were an unconscious level. And then as he got to serving in the context and then came back to the States and then returned for a visit, and then he had even more insight, and so his own kind of introspection and opening that up in that episode was good. And then his struggle, he said too, when people talk about Africa as a monolithic place and African culture is a monolithic thing, and for him to try to explain like Niger, where he was, and the local culture there is a particular unique culture among many. And so I guess maybe even helping us, and maybe our audience in the podcast, to realize, like, as we talk about Africa and other countries, just to realize the nuance that's there, not to paint with too broad of a brush. And that was another helpful insight he brought, for sure. And then, yes, you're right. I think the episode with Brendan was so special because you had both been in middle school together. And also, did you do high school as well, or was it just middle school?
Um, I think high school as well. Yeah.
High school. Okay. Yeah. And so there was a lot of catching up. And then I
Mhm.
think, we were trying to interview him, but I think he told me this after the episode. He's like, "Sorry, Jacob. I asked so many questions of Barney," but I think in a sense, he was trying to interview you about
Mhm.
Japan, because he was so fascinated.
Yeah.
As we'd ask a question about his experience, and then he quickly wanted to shift. Well, how does that play out in Japan?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a rich conversation, and there were a lot of great connections, but like you said, it made for a longer episode. But it was really interesting though.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
yeah, and Myanmar, and then I think you understood some things about his cultural context already too, so there were just some really interesting points of connection there.
Right. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, thanks. I like those examples for sure. Were there any episodes this year or topics we touched on that you kind of hoped, boy, I would love for our listeners to hear this part of it particularly and go away with a deeper sense of something in this area, like a deeper sense, a deeper understanding for them, or of this
Mhm.
topic in general? And I was kind of wondering if any episode really spoke on that level for you, that you felt like this is a message people need to hear, or that I would love for people to hear.
Yeah, boy, that's a great question. And as I look back through the titles and the different episodes that we did, um, there were really so many different topics that we covered and that were so neat and interesting. Um, I think maybe as I'm looking here, maybe two things that I can think of, and in a way they're kind of connected. Um, I liked when we talked with one another about our careers, about our vocations,
Mm.
and I thought that really um, really helped to open up what it is to be a pastor. I thought, and probably what it is to be a teacher. But I thought, yeah, that's something that probably a lot of people don't know, but probably a lot of people assume that they know. Um, what it is that teachers and pastors do, and how it is that they get ready and how they manage classes and sermons and pastoral care and things like that. And I think that was really another way of peeking behind the door in a way, to see um, um, really this kind of fresh point of view, kind of I don't want to say raw, but like an unfiltered way to look
Yes.
into what it is to these vocations. And I thought, like, maybe some that kind of connected with that, and something that people could really gain some insight from, and I think maybe challenge them to think about a little bit more, was the mentorship episode
Mm.
that we did. That helped me to see the various points of points of view, or the various different directions mentoring can take. And it's, I think that maybe we've had, because of COVID, maybe it's been harder to kind of engage in this kind of relationship um, of late. And I wonder if people have kind of forgotten about this kind of art of having mentors and proteges and whatnot. And I think that that would be something for people to kind of re-engage and see in their lives how maybe they're being mentored, or see any opportunities that maybe they have to kind of step out of their comfort zone, and kind of find a way to ask someone if maybe they need a little bit of guidance, and maybe it's something that they could provide in a certain area. And I think that I know from my personal experience, having someone just give me that little snippet of advice here and there as kind of a jumping off point, and me realizing, oh wow, I really need to kind of spend more time with this person, and kind of this informal, natural mentoring relationship is formed, and it's very, very helpful in a lot of ways for seeing person being mentored, seeing different sides of their lives and what they're doing, and the person mentoring even seeing different points of views, looking at things differently and expressing things differently in their lives through teaching. And I hope that a lot of people are thinking about that more and more from that episode.
Yes, I agree 100%. I really wanted for that episode for people to go away with a sense that, number one, to be thankful for the people in our life who have been like mentors to us, who have come alongside us. And the second part, for people to go away with a willingness to think about who could they come alongside and extend that same support to. We don't always think about it from that angle, but there are a lot of people out there and in our lives who would really benefit from us taking interest in them, and showing that we care even more um, intently and directly. So 100%, I agree. That episode was very meaningful, and I really wanted that message to come through. I think as I look back over this year, thinking about the episode with Lee, thinking about the episode with Sean, and then another episode that we did called um, Lost and Found.
Oh yeah.
And that one, I was able to share with you about a CD that I discovered of my mom teaching at her
Yeah.
church. And that fit right into those other episodes I just mentioned about this thread of encouraging people in the midst of their grief, that there can be healing and growth, and that they can come through it on the other side being more whole as a person, and um, healthy as a person. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's
Mm-hmm.
something I really wanted our audience to hear from those episodes, that grief, though it's intense and overwhelming, and each person has a different experience of it, at the same time, there's great potential there for change and transformation, and personal growth, and newness and renewal, and that we can get through it with God's help and with other people coming alongside us. And so I was really hoping that would come through. And I think that was a big theme this year for me. And then another theme that's a little bit more subtle is about being present and mindful of the simple joys of everyday life. We had a lot of episodes that touch on that. Just small things, like we had a gifts of gratitude episode. We've had episodes where we talked about breakfast and about coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and just lots of daily simple
Mm.
experiences that are often shared in relationship with family and friends, that um, if we're not looking and being mindful, we can take them for granted, or they wash past us, and we don't have um, any real sense of gratitude for them. But I was really hoping this year that as we highlight some of those, that would help people kind of savor and enjoy the simple joys and and pleasures and experiences in their own life that they can share with their loved ones. So that was another theme that
Mhm.
I was really hoping would come through.
Yeah, I really appreciated of the different themes that we've had. I really think that one thing that we key in on, and I don't think it's intentional. I just think that through our conversations and through thinking about these everyday kind of things, that yeah, we really are able to kind of tease out meaning and beauty in these everyday experiences, and see them as these free gifts, but also as luxuries in a way. Like even thinking about the episode that we did about smells, and
Yes.
you know, it's it's so easy to as it's an action that we do all the time. It's so easy to think, oh wow, the fresh bread smells great, oh that's nice, now what do I need to do, or wow, these flowers are so nice, wow, they smell great, that's nice, now what do I need to do? But um thinking of it as the emotions that they evoke, the memories that they give to us, and the ways that we um, hear how other people think about smells, or they see the same smell, or and how those looking at these everyday things like coffee and breakfast, how it leads to a springboard of I think myself for sure, and probably you as well, appreciating them a little bit more, and um, engaging the people around us to like our family, to look at these things too and see how they appreciate them a little bit more too. And yeah, I think especially breakfast. I found it was when I was home in Ohio this past summer. It was such a it's such a very wonderful time for me. As at the beginning, it was my family and my dad, and then the second half of my visit was my family, my dad, and my sister and her family. And it made me realize that yeah, this really kind of shows us why it's the most important meal of the day,
Mm.
and not just because of the caloric sustenance, but the sustenance of the people that you have the chance to share it with, when you have the chance to sit down together.
Mm.
And I like that we get to talk about these tiny little kind of microscopic view of certain topics, and finding the meaning and really the beauty in them. I really like that and look forward to that with this podcast.
Me too, Barney. I
Mhm.
agree wholeheartedly. Well, I'm kind of wondering, would this be an okay time for me to share some quotes with you from our past episodes, and then
Okay.
maybe challenge you to guess who you think said the quote, and we can
Okay.
test your knowledge of our body of
Well,
conversation here,
yeah,
and
right, yeah.
see what stands out to you. And
Hmm.
I don't have sounds pre-selected
No,
for a
no
right or
buzzes or
wrong
anything. Yeah,
answer,
right, yeah,
but
right, yeah,
we can just
right.
give it a shot as we go
Okay.
here. So, does that sound good?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
I'm I'm ready to take a stab at this.
All right, great. Here's our first quote. I think we actually need the dark times to become the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, when I um that was I tried, when I knew that we were going to do this. I tried not to look at any of the other quotes, but I looked at that quote, and I wondered if that one was from Lee Matzos.
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
Yes, and specifically the that experience of having the concussions, and that was kind of
Mm.
coinciding with the journey of grief of losing his mom, and that also
Hmm.
overlapping with COVID, all like this combination of hard things. Um and those are the dark times, I think
Hmm.
he's talking
Hmm.
about, and
Hmm.
that helped him grow and discover the music that he would go on to write and
Hmm.
share with others. So yes, very
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, good job, Barney. One for one so far.
All
So
right. Yeah.
yeah, good strong start.
Yeah.
Okay, next quote. Slowly, slowly doesn't keep you from reaching your destination, but it does keep you from getting there at the right time.
I think that this one stuck with me, and I hope I'm getting it right because I think that this was some advice that someone gave to Michael Ludwig. Is that right?
Yes, yes, you are right. Good job.
Uh
Ding, 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 ding. Yes,
huh.
Michael said that when he was in Niger, he really appreciated the proverbs that were common in just regular daily life. And this was one of the ones that really stuck with him. And the way he said it would work is that one person would say, slowly, slowly doesn't keep you from reaching your destination. And then the second person would know to
Oh
respond,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
it
yeah.
does keep
That's
you
what it
from
was.
getting there at the right time. So it was just kind of a little inside
Yeah.
understanding that this proverb involves both people, and it kind of gets at the idea of not to be too rushed in life. You might be punctual if you're rushing around doing things, but at the same time, it could be you could miss something or
Mm,
could be unduly stressed out or unhealthy. I think that's the wisdom of the proverb, that
mm-hmm,
as he was
mm-hmm,
explaining it.
mm-hmm.
Okay, next quote. I had to learn to fail graciously and pick myself up and keep trying.
Oh boy, this is a tricky one. I wonder if this sounds like something that someone from Worcester Mennonite might say. I'm not sure if it was Jen or if it was Molly, but for some reason that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know how close I
Well, you are correct. It's one of those two people.
am.
So
um,
you're definitely right. You've narrowed it down
yeah.
to two, and it's one of those two.
Huh. Is it Jen?
It is not, it is Molly.
It was Molly.
And
Oh,
she would go
okay.
on to say after that quote, she would talk about kind of like faux pas and say, like, I
Oh.
try to pick myself back up even when, I accidentally commit a faux
Mm.
pas or,
Mm-hmm.
but just to keep trying. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
to make effort to smile and to keep reaching out to
Oh
people.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is
Yeah.
such a good
Mm.
approach, healthy approach to life. Um, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
This next one, this is a really solid quote. It's definitely
Yeah.
a quotable quote. Um, so much of who you are is how you have served others.
Oh, okay. I wonder if this is from the mentoring episode. And is it the guy that you I don't think it was your the professor who coached you through or who saw your PhD program, but I wonder if it's the guy who you took the picture of with at the statue, like you and he both took a
In
picture
Bluffton, there
together.
the statue of Men
Yes, at
Assignments.
the statue. Uh-huh.
That person's name was Marvin Lorenzana, and he did the
Yeah.
Missional Discipleship Initiative
Mm-hmm.
for Mennonite
Mm-hmm.
Mission Network.
Yeah.
It's not Marvin, and
Oh,
my doctoral advisor was Amos Young,
Amos Young. Uh-huh.
and it wasn't Amos.
It wasn't
It's
him
actually from a
either.
different episode, but those are good
Okay.
guesses for sure.
Yeah,
I could
thanks.
see either one of them saying that.
Sure,
Um,
fitting in there.
yes.
Oh yeah, then I'm not sure.
Okay. It was the episode we did with Ralph Reinford when he talked about his
Oh.
service experience. And then this was one of his reflections, kind of looking back on his years of
Oh
ministry,
yeah.
thinking about the different service work that he had done. And that's when he gave
Mm,
that
mm, mm,
quote.
mm, mm.
So much of who you are is how you have served others, kind of looking
Oh
back on
yeah,
his
that's
life.
great.
So, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
all right. This next one I like a lot. I think
Okay.
it's a really interesting quote.
Yeah.
Food is the currency of love. It just builds relationships and it builds community.
Wow. So I of course I would think that that was Bill Seymour, but these are all from second season. Is that right?
Yes, these are all from second season.
Okay. Hmm. Now that I know, I am not sure. Um. Wow.
You've already mentioned this person in our episode so far.
Really?
Yes,
Wow. Was that Brendan then?
it was Brendan.
Oh,
Yes, he
okay.
was talking about at this particular juncture in the conversation his neighbors, and he said,
Oh,
if I want to give them
yeah.
money, they won't take money. Like
Yes.
if you
They
want to
won't
thank them for
take it.
helping you, they won't take money. But food is the currency of love. Like you can't get money as currency, but you can feed people and take food to them. And then he went on to say that that just builds relationship and it builds community. So that was
Oh
where that's
yeah.
from. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was
Mhm.
such a neat aspect of that culture.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. Our next one.
Okay.
Having loss makes you treasure other moments and other people even more. You're
Mm.
like, okay, I better make this count.
Oh, that that sounds like maybe something Sean would say.
Yep, you're right. That was exactly what
Oh,
Sean
yeah.
said. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our
Okay.
episode on grief. Very good. Well
Yeah,
done.
that was so good. Yeah, really.
Mm.
Yeah. Ooh, I'm glad that you didn't quote me because I would have been so embarrassed if I got one of my own quotes wrong.
Uh, um,
Ah, yeah. Boy, I think all of these could be on some calendar, on some quote of the day thing. They're all really very impactful. And I really appreciate you taking the time to
oh
bring this
yeah.
up
Oh
again.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, if it's okay, I have three more, and they're
Okay.
just and it's limited to you, me, and Ken.
Oh
So,
no.
so if it's not putting you too much on the spot, you can
I
guess
know.
whether it was
Okay.
you or whether it was me or it was Ken who said these. So,
Okay. All right.
okay. It is important to be vulnerable and real and open to people around you and open to God and to take one day at a time. And that one day at a time phrase is maybe a hint. Um, if you think about which episode it came from and which of us
Hmm.
might have said that. Do you remember like one day at a time is important for a certain um,
Hmm.
spirituality that we've talked about in one of our episodes? Um,
Huh. Let's see, boy.
it's
We're
let me give you another
extra.
hint. When Kai was here and we went to
Ah.
Akron, there was a chapel that we
Yeah,
stopped
yeah,
by,
yeah.
and the chapel had a display dedicated to this
Oh. Oh, yeah.
spirituality.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Okay. Then is it the 12 steps
12
program
steps
thing?
program.
Yeah.
So it would have
So
probably been,
was it you then?
it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
me. Yeah, it
Okay,
was
good.
me
Yeah, good. Yeah.
talking.
Oh,
That was
that's
in
nice.
relation to my grandfather and how he used to say,
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to live one day at a time. And that was a
Mm-hmm.
really important part of his spirituality. And that was inspired by going through the 12 step program. Yes.
Oh,
All
right.
right.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Okay. This next one, these next two, now it's down to you and
Okay.
Ken.
I know.
You have a
Oh
50-50
boy.
chance.
Oh
These are
man.
both from our most popular Northern Exposure episode.
Oh
Um,
wow. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Um, so this is here it is. Everything is more fun when you're watching it in a group.
Yeah. I know that that one was from Ed said that episode. Ed said that, and I think that I said that one.
Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
You quoted
Yeah,
Ed.
right.
Yes, well
Yeah,
done.
good. Yeah, that's good.
So,
Okay,
and
I
then
had a little bit
Ken
doubt there at the
said in
beginning.
that
Yeah. Mhm.
same episode, ultimately, it's a decision about marrying a friend and being a friend and having that
Mm.
loving, intimate relationship that's going to provide some happiness. So I
Oh
thought that was
wow.
a
Oh,
nice
that's really
quote.
nice one. Oh
Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
yeah,
Ooh, those are good. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Barney. You did a great job identifying the quotes,
Yes,
and
thank you very much. Yeah.
I think you've got many more than I would have gotten if we had flipped it. So
Oh, yeah, sure.
so maybe next year we
Okay.
can do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Mm-hmm.
quiz me or something.
Right.
But thank you, Barney, for 2 years of this journey. I really
Oh yeah.
have enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to what's next for our
Mm-hmm.
podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm so excited, and I hope that you're excited. Everyone out there is excited too for the topics and the guests that we will have on. And how about for some final thoughts from you, Jacob?
Yes, I just want to thank our audience for staying with us all of this time and for your own thoughts and questions that you would bring when you would listen to these episodes. You're always welcome to share with us if there's something you would like us to speak about or focus on for an episode. We actually had that happen this past year. One of our listeners asked us to do an episode on omotenashi and how the Japanese athletes display that in international sporting events. There had been a really powerful example of that at the World Cup, and so we actually ended up talking about that in response to a comment from a listener. So if you ever would like to share something like that, please do, and we're grateful for you, and we look forward to next time. So until then, goodbye.